Thank you so much for the moderation. My name is Julia Hartung-Ziehlke. I'm the project coordinator of the diBa-Model project and currently on parental leave, but it is a pleasure for me to be here and to make a contribution to the diBa conference. And it is great that I can be with you online, and I'm happy to have the chance to talk a little bit about the starting point and the context of the diBa-Model project. Well, and I'm just gonna get started with showing you the structure of my presentation. I'm going to speak a little about the some facts of the project, and I'm going to talk about the initial starting point or starting situation of it. Then I'm going to talk about the overall target of the project, the research design, the timing and phase plan, and then I'm going to talk about the development of education offers. So let me start by talking about the target group. Now, this project is addressing severely disabled persons with mental and physical disabilities that work in institutions of the work with disabled persons, and it's also addressed to severely disabled persons that have already been working on the general labor market or not. So the project started on the 1st of September in 2019, and it will continue to be running until the end of August, so we're almost done. The partner of cooperation is the cooperative of the sheltered workshops for people with disabilities in northern Germany, and we are funded by the Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs. We're paid with grant fundings from the equalization levy. Now, let's take a look at the initial situation, at the starting situation. We refer to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and Article 9, which is the accessibility. So the accessibility to information is necessary in order to be involved into all situations of life, because this will provide people with disabilities with major potentials, and by this, individual education potentials can be used, but qualification can be done, development can take place so that people are qualified for the general labor market. What has a lot of value is that digital education offers can be adapted to the special needs of the target groups, and an ideal learning environment can be created by this. These educational offers can create participation and promote this remarkably if people are able of making use of these offers, if they have access in general to these resources. And despite the legal framework, in real life we see that the usage of digital media or education programs is sometimes really hard to get access to. This might be due to the application themselves, for instance, and this is why we from the diBa project looked at the access options, and we also tried to look at how we can, in general, allow for qualification for the general labor market. So besides the implementation of Article 9, we also looked at Article 24, which is about education. So it is about allowing these people to participate in education and education programs, and the implementation of Article 27 on labor and employment, or work and employment, is really important, because this also looks at how to make it possible for these people to take part in qualifications, and that they can start working or restart working, and to integrate them into the general labor market and to promote this. Now, we orient everything on the reality of life of these persons. so that the persons with disabilities are involved when it comes to the implementation and realization. And that's why the federal legislation on participation is also taken into consideration while doing that.
So, komme ich zum Gesamtziel
Now, this
des
brings me to the
Vorhabens. Das
overall
Ziel
target
des
of our
Vorhabens war die
project. With the
Flächenbewegung
help of
ermöglicht
our
werden,
project,
grundlegende
we want
berufliche
people with
Kompetenzen zu
disabilities
erlernen, die
to
wichtig
have
sind,
the
um
chance
in der
to
Arbeits- und
acquire
Berufswelt auch in einem
fundamental
neuen
professional
Arbeitsmarkt bestehen
competences
zu
that are
können,
important
mit
in
dem
order
Ziel, wie
to be
schon
able to
gesagt,
take
die
part
Übergänge in den
in the
allgemeinen
world of
Arbeitsmarkt zu fördern.
labor in general and have access
Ja,
to
und
this
so
labor or
Umsetzung
employment
dieses
market. Now, on
Vorhabens
the
haben wir folgende
implementation
Schritte
of our project,
verfolgt, als
we
Designerin
agreed
die
on
Erweiterung der
several steps. The first
Dienstleistungen und
one is the enhancement
Unterstützungsangebote
of the offers
durch
of
die Entwicklung
services
der
and
digitalen
support by
Bildungsangebote. Es geht um die
accompanying and
Begleitung und
implementing
Umsetzung
digital education
digitaler
processes. It's also
Bildungskonzepte
about
auf Grundlage
identifying
von
further need for
Bedarf
action,
und Benutzung der
um,
Bildungsangebote sowie um die
as well
Identifizierung
as well the
weiterer
identification of a
Handlungsbedarfe
further
zur
a need for
Optimierung
action
der
in order
Umsetzung
to
digitaler Bildungsprozesse und es
improve
geht um die
the
Impulse
education
für eine
processes.
Anpassung der
And then it was also
Bildungsstruktur
about
in einem
adapting
Modell
the
grundsätzlich
educational
der Probe
structure
in den teilnehmenden
in
Einrichtungen.
all the
Ja, und Ziel ist
participating
es, Impulse für
institutions. And
eine
well, the overall target
Neuorientierung im
is
Rahmen der
to
digitalen
address a
Bildungslandschaft in den Ländern
reorientation of the
ja, zu
educational
schaffen,
landscape in all the
herzustellen.
institutions and to shape this landscape.
Vor diesem Hintergrund liegt die
Against this
Betrachtung von drei
backdrop,
Perspektiven bei uns
there
im Fokus.
is
Einmal die
there are
Perspektive der
three
Menschen mit
perspectives.
Behinderung,
So
ja,
first of
mit
all, we have
Hochrisikopatienten
the
oder
perspective
sogenannte
of the people with
Wolfenbuttel-Patienten,
disabilities. We
die wir
carried out
einmal
so-called
befragt
world
haben.
cafes,
Also
and
wir
what we
mit
did
Menschen mit
there
Behinderung
was
gesprochen haben und
talking
gefragt haben,
to
was
the
braucht
persons
denn,
with
was braucht ihr, um
disabilities,
euch
and
für
we
den
asked them,
Arbeitsmarkt
what do
gut
you
zu
need in order to be
qualifizieren? Für
qualified
welche
for the
Arbeitsstelle
employment
interessiert ihr
market?
euch
What jobs
diesbezüglich?
are you
Welche
interested in?
Kompetenzen sind denn
What
notwendig, um
competences
überhaupt auf dem
are
allgemeinen
necessary
Arbeitsmarkt
in order
bestehen
to
zu
have a
können?
chance on the
Und wie
general
sieht die
labor
Nutzung
market?
digitaler Medien
And
jetzt einfach auch aus?
what does the
In
usage
der
of digital
Perspektive
media
der
look like?
Einrichtungen
Then
wurden
we also
Experteninterviews
had
mit
the
den
perspective
Fachkräften
of the
geführt und sie
institutions.
hatten
So we
unter
did
anderem
expert
recherchiert,
interviews here,
welche
and we
Unterstützungsbedarfe
talked
haben denn
about
überhaupt die
what need,
Fachkräfte bei der
what
Nutzung
type of
digitaler Medien, wie
support
die
is actually needed. What
Zugangsmöglichkeiten
about
bisher
the
in den
access
Einrichtungen aus
possibilities in the
und wie läuft
institutions,
überhaupt die
and how is the
Zusammenarbeit mit den
cooperation
Arbeitgebenden im
done with
allgemeinen
the employers
Arbeitsmarkt
in
nach
general
dieser
in the general
Übergangsform.
labor market?
Ja, und auch mit den Arbeitgebenden des allgemeinen Arbeitsmarktes
Then
haben
we
wir im Rahmen
also
von
talked
Experteninterviews
to
gesprochen und
the
sie hat uns auch unter
employer, so
anderem
we carried out
interessiert,
expert
welche
interviews here as
fachlichen
well in order
Kompetenzen
to find
müssen
out
Menschen
what
mit Behinderung denn
competences are
mitbringen, damit sie
necessary
in
in
verschiedenen
for
Berufsfeldern
these
tätig sein
persons
können.
with disabilities in order to have
Ja,
access
ganz
to
kurz möchte ich
the
etwas
labor
zum Zeit- und
market.
Phasenplan sagen.
Then
Wir
I would like
haben
to
Phase
comment
1 war
this
unser
timing
Sampling vom
schedule and phase
Dezember
schedule. So
2019 bis
we
April
had the
2020.
first
Dann
phase
kam
or
auch
starting with
unsere
the sampling on
übergreifende
1st of December
Sekundäranalyse,
2019.
auch unter
Then we started
Berücksichtigung
the
der eben
secondary
vorgestellten
analysis in a second
Perspektiven.
phase.
Wir
Here
haben
we
eine
started to look at the
Internetrecherche
different
durchgeführt
perspectives. We did
sowie
an
eine
internet research.
Dokumentenanalyse. Die
A document
Dokumentenanalyse
analysis
ja,
was
war
also part of it,
genutzt Grundlage die
and
Bildungsstudie der GDW
the
Nord, was uns
educational
vorstellt, wie viel
study of
überhaupt an Bildungsbedarf
GDW
noch
Nord is
grundsätzlich
included here as
erfasst.
well. And we
Und
looked at what
in der
data are
Internetrecherche
already
haben wir uns
recorded. We did
unter anderem
internal
den
research. We
Beschäftigungsstandpunkt von
looked
Menschen mit
at
Behinderung auf
the
dem allgemeinen
professional
Arbeitsmarkt beschäftigt,
status
welche
of the different
Verordnungen und
people, what
Rahmenbedingungen
legislation and
entsprechend für
regulations there are,
verschiedene
and what
Arbeitnehmende
offers
zur Verfügung stehen.
do the
Ja, in der
employers have.
Primäranalyse von September
Then we did the primary
2020
analysis
bis
from 1st of
August
September
2021
2020
haben wir
through
ja die
31st of August
eben vorgestellte
2021.
Gruppendiskussion und die
So
Experteninterviews
this is
durchgeführt. Meine
the
Kollegin Frau
phase in
Dr.
which we did the expert
Frankenstein wird im
interviews,
Anschluss dann gleich
and
noch die
my
Ergebnisse
colleague
des
Mrs.
vorstellen
Frankenstein is going
und
to
die
introduce this or explain
Implementierungsphase
this a
von
little bit
Juni
more. And then
21
phase
bis
number
Februar
4 is the
22 für die
implementation
fachliche
phase, started
Erprobung
on
und
1st of
Nutzung
June
der Angebote
2021
im
through
Alltag.
28th
Da
of
würde mein
February
Kollege
this year.
Benjamin Rink noch etwas
And
zu berichten und
my
zum
colleague
Schluss ja
Benjamin
die
Rink is going to talk about
Auswertungsphase
this
von
implementation phase.
Januar
And then
bis
we had
Juli
the evaluation phase
2022.
from 1st of January this year
Genau.
until
Ja, und dann komme ich auch
30th
schon zu
June
meiner
this
letzten
year. Now, this
Folie,
brings me to my
und
last
zwar die
slide already.
partizipative
So,
Entwicklung
this is about the
digitaler
participatory
Bildungsangebote.
development of
Hier möchte
digital
ich ganz kurz
education
berichten über
offers. Let
die
me just
Domänen
briefly
Beruf.
report
Der
on this.
Schwerpunkt sind die
So,
beruflichen
here the key point
Kompetenzen.
are the
Da liegt der
professional
Fokus auf den
competences. So, we
Angeboten. Die
focus on the
Bildungsvermittlung
offers.
soll die Verfügbarkeit
Imparting
der
knowledge is to be
Dienstleistungen
done done via the computer, tablets, or smartphones. And here it was important that no preliminary knowledge is necessary with regards to a specific topic or subject, and people were supposed to acquire all the information they needed in a self-determined way. So much about myself. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you'll have a great conference, interesting conference, and all the best for you. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hartung-Ziehlke, for introducing this to us, and that we're already informed what we can expect next. So beforehand, we decided to explain the project beforehand, and then after all the presentations, you have the chance to ask questions. And I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Frankenstein, who is going to talk about the primary analysis and the group discussions. Hello, and thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you, Julia, for the words of introduction and for explaining the or initial situation. I would like to welcome you here as well. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the expert interviews, the evaluation of it, and the group discussion. Within the framework of data generation, we've had group discussions with employees of the sheltered workshops. So as Julia Hartung-Ziehlke already said, that we looked at the need for education, the professional competences, and the usage of digital media was what we focused on. And due to the corona situation, we've had the group discussions ongoing, but independently. So the workers in the institutions carried out the group discussions as well. There was only one institution where we could do the group discussions ourselves, but we were not allowed to enter the other institutions due to the corona pandemic. So the implementation of the group discussions was done in 4 rounds with 3 to 10 participants, so that in each institution, approximately 30 employees from the different areas were questioned and took part in this group discussion. The participants were discussing about the topics dealing with working on the general labor market and digital education offers, digital media. The moderating specialists used a guideline to carry out the discussion. So first of all, we wanted to know what type of jobs the participants are interested in, where would they like to work, and what they need in order to be able to work in that field. We also asked about what their experiences are, so whether or not they've already been part of the general labor market or employment market, and what they like best. Furthermore, we also asked them what they need to know, what they need to learn in order to be able to work on the labor market, and what type of support they need. And also what type of support would be the best for them. Then the second area on digital education offers and digital media. Well, first of all, we asked what digital media they actually have. So whether they have a smartphone, if they're computers, and also if they have an internet contract. And then furthermore, of course, the usage itself was an important topic. So how digital media are used by people with disabilities in the institutions. Then we asked about what support they need, whether or not they are familiar with the smartphone and the computer, if they can work with this media, and we also asked what they like best about digital media. And what was very important as well is the topic, or everything that deals with learning in general. So there was the question on how to learn with digital media, how you can use the computer and the smartphone in order to get information or to prepare for a training, for qualification. And then the last question was how digital, or what digital learning programs have to look like so that they would use it and that they are fun to use as well, so that people really want to use them. So in general, we can say that digital media, or people have a high interest in digital media. So smartphones and cell phones are widely spread. So more than half of our participants do have a cell phone or smartphone, tablet, and a computer is widespread as well, but not half of the participants do have one. And most of them also have their own internet contract, or at least access to the internet via the institution or their parents or their family. So all in all, we can say that the digital media are used in order for leisure time purposes, so to speak, for entertainment, also in order to stay in touch with friends and family. Voice messages are used very frequently. So in general, and we can say that, well, it's really about the usage of digital media during leisure time, and it's not really about learning. So many people with a disability and impairments cannot really think of digital media in the context of learning and education, and this is why they do not focus on this topic when it comes to using digital media. Furthermore, a permanent support and assistance is what they wish to have, or what they want when it comes to using digital media. And this is what they require, actually, what they demand. Now, on the demand that we identified as a result of the group discussion, we can say that, all in all, practical physical working is a type of work that many people with disabilities are interested in. Also, the social component is part of the focus here. And then various activities were mentioned as well. So things that continue to change, so comparing it to what they do in the sheltered workshops. And then motivation and self-esteem was mentioned as well as something important, something that affects work in general as well. And now when it comes to the general labor market or employment market, stability and resistance are important, as well as knowing how to handle pressure. So much about the perspective of the persons with disabilities. Oh no, that's wrong. There's one more slide here on the overview of the educational topics. So we were able to state that there are certain things, and because we wanted to create our own education offers, that was one of the objectives we had. So let me give you this overview now. So educational topics on the general employment market were mentioned. Work instructions, explanations, work steps, and type of information on the job search, application training, communication with the employer, talking on the phone, being independent, and how to act in this labor market. Those are all the topics that were mentioned by the people. Now, when it comes to the job fields, we were able to see, and that's what I said before, many people are interested in the social area, but there are also areas that that the people from the sheltered workshops know. So household, assembly, storage logistics, and the like. When it comes to educational topics, media didactics, well then working with the computer, tablet, and the smartphone is what they use. Hands-free functions were mentioned. That's what persons with disabilities are interested in, and also an introduction into technical devices. And when it comes to the design and the setup of education offers, what is mentioned again is easy language, simple language and working a lot with pictograms, animations, and, well, pictures in general, and that activities and quizzes what they really like to see and what they like to work with, because this makes learning more fun. So that was the perspective of the persons with disabilities, and now this brings me to the second perspective, which is the perspective of the institutions. We carried out expert interviews with the workers. We talked about the needs of support, the access possibilities, and the cooperation or collaboration with the employers. These interviews took place with persons or professionals coming from various areas. So we've had 2 interviews with 2 experts from the labor market, 2 from the educational area, and 2 more of the qualification area, and a strong focus on the meaning of a good support, good assistance of people with disabilities was mentioned. So both when it comes to the transition to the general labor market, but when it comes to qualification here in general. So I brought along 2 quotes here just to give you an example. So on the one on the right-hand side, here it said that, well, if you look at, or you cannot really tell that someone has a disability if you look at our employees and that they need a specific assistance, and this is why companies or the employees on site don't really consider this when they see these people. And the other quote says the following thing. So, or actually, again, it emphasizes the importance of the assistance. So we have great, motivated people with a certain with restrictions, and they are willing to give their best, but they need assistance on site, or an on-site assistance. So this shows the importance of well, the assistance. And it also shows us that there is a lack of understanding for people with disabilities on the labor market. That's what they would encounter. Now, the need for education and qualification based on our interviews have shown the importance of personal assistance, personal support, social competences being in the focus were mentioned again, certain virtues of labor of work, and then there's a need for information so that you can get information on working on the general labor market. The knowledge about different fields of action and job fields could be increased. This is important as well. Then media competence is important, as well as easy language, simple language. This is something that we continue to see, because this was mentioned again and again, that this should be made use of even more. Generally spoken, we can say that digital education offers are not yet a crucial part of the education in the sheltered workshops on a daily basis, and the technical infrastructure and the experiences with using media is something that can be extended. This is or enhanced. This is what people say. I will now get to the third perspective, which is the perspective of the employers. We carried out expert interviews here as well with employers of the general employment market, and we asked about the preconditions for hiring people with disabilities in their company. We asked them about their experiences. We also asked about the areas where they use or where they could employ people with disabilities, in what areas, and with the integration or specialized integration services, we also talked to them as well. And furthermore, we also talked about the qualification needs that there are for employing people with disabilities, and what digital options of qualification the respective employers offer. When talking to the employers, we have seen that the meaning for of digital media for the qualification is seen as a criteria for being qualified to work on the general labor market. And I brought along some quotes here as well. So the green one says that it is especially self-management that would be, or it would be good if people could have a digital offer to acquire knowledge when it comes to self-management. And then the red one here says that, of course, people are supposed to be able to use digital media, or at least they should be able to do this to their own to the extent of their own possibilities. That's important, and everything else will then be managed in real life, but they should generally have the competence. So this shows us that being able to use digital media would lead to being able to work in general. So we can state that the result of the interviews that we did with the employers, that all in all there was a really positive mindset when it comes to employing people with disabilities. Furthermore, an organizational cooperation with third parties is seen as important. This mostly deals with the cooperation with institutions and less frequently with the specialized integration services. And when it comes to the exchange, this is mostly about an informal exchange. It's more about organizational topics when it comes to working with people with disabilities. For some companies, the collaboration with people with disabilities is that they would be sort of a supplier, and this type of cooperation can then also be the starting base for people with disabilities to work in the company, like an internship. That could also be one of the starting options here. Then, well, the quota regulation, this was evaluated in different ways or assessed differently. So mostly people said that protection against dismissal would not be hindering hiring people with disabilities. And it was also said that this would not be relevant for hiring someone, and same applies to the quota regulation. What would be more important would be the size of the company. And, well, the person and activity related questions are more important. So most people say that it does not really differ from what we see with people without disabilities, but it's more about the individual competences that the respective candidate has. Now, when it comes to the required competence for working on the general labor market, well, as we said before, that's it is more about an individual assessment of the persons and the actual activity, the actual job. And independently from this, it was more about the relevance of social competences, being able to accept criticism, the abilities to communicate, social behavior, being tolerant or open for frustration, and being able to, well, just and being open to accept help. And furthermore, different virtues of work are important, like being there on time, being honest, discipline, paying attention. So all these topics, all the developed education offers that we develop orient on these kind of things as well. Dr. Engelkes, my colleague, is going to speak more about this, or Doerte Engelkes is going to speak about this. Now, on digital education media offers, I can tell you that it's part of the corporate qualification practice, and in part there are companies that offer e-learning courses or education courses, but all in all we can say that's rather in a state of trial or being tested. And actually this brings me to the end of my presentation, and I will now hand over to Benjamin Rink. Thank you very much.
Ja, vielen
Thank
Dank.
you so much, Dr. Frankenstein, for your explanations. We have seen three viewpoints. The one of the employers that underlines the necessity of digital competences and media competences, irrespective of industries. Then the outlook of the sheltered workshops that have underlined that accompanying the clients is important so that it's not overtaxing them. And what I find rather specific in the project and would underline here is the outlook when it comes to the demand of the people with disabilities, which who are not integrated just because they're applying it and using it, but that right from the beginning were involved, so they are just as expert as the others, and participation is taken very seriously. I find that really important that in the design of the study this was included already. And now we'll be hearing from Mr. Rink, who is writing his doctoral thesis, if I'm right, and will tell us a bit about implementation.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you so much. I would like to give you an overview into the results of the implementation stage. In focus of the implementation stage is the question, how can individual digital education be given in the everyday scenario of the institutions? We have tried out certain digital scenarios and we found out what kind of support people need. In the 6 project institutions, we established so-called model groups, and the model groups always consisted of around 7 employees, 7 people with disabilities from the area of work of the individual institutions, and these were accompanied by an expert, by a professional, usually a group leader of a certain area of work. On top, we had a person with disability who was particularly pro when it came to handling digital media, and he became the diBa expert. And it was among the tasks of this diBa expert to support others when trying out media as a peer person. In the implementation stage, we went through 3 steps, and each implementation stage consisted of about 8 lessons, 8 hours of learning, and each phase was ended with a concluding talk in which we sat together with the expert, with the professional and the diBa expert, evaluating the results of that particular phase. And in that context, we went on planning the further steps in order to try out various education scenarios. The basis for the data evaluation are 3 evaluation instruments. We have participating observation of the model groups, that's number 1. Number 2, the evaluation talks based on a guideline. And then thirdly, a half-standardized survey questionnaire. Now, I would like to present central issues of the model groups to you. And in doing so, I would mainly like to show the ones that I mentioned before, the use of education offers through people with disabilities. Second bullet point, assistance and intervention. Third bullet point, design of access. 4, participation of employees or of people involved. And 3, and last bullet point, cooperation of actors. A very important result of the practical tryout is that the practical use of digital media was very well liked by everyone across all the institutions. For me, as a participating observer, it was always quite interesting to see when in the model groups the tablets were actually used and the digital education platform was being used, because then there was a moment of calm all of a sudden once people started using it. And the effect was enhanced when headphones were being used, because that led to a situation that interaction was discontinued and the people were solely using the tablet computers. And on top, what became evident was that as regards working without barriers, the independence of use became better with every usage. So once people developed a certain routine, people were able to overcome any type of barriers that there might be with using digital media. Be that as it may, till the very end of the implementation stage, there was always some assistance being required, which we observed, which was then given in the context of the model group by people in the model group. Very often, digital education programs were also used to connect them to the topics that were important for everyday life. Topics of, personal life were coming to the foreground, which also led to the fact that topics for qualification for the general labor market were sort of somewhat were going into the backs of people's minds. Now, what you see here, or the chart before has already referred to it, that the practical use of digital education was done with assistance from the experts and the use of the media. And this picture shows it, that there is a context of action, participation of people involved, design of access, and the cooperation of all the actors involved. And in the center of this interaction, very often we have the professionals who in the model groups mainly manage and structure this type of interaction. And this relationship is sort of confirmed by employees with disabilities seeking assistance. In practical terms, in the learning platform, education platform, people need to register there. Very often that's a hurdle that needs to be overcome, and there is some practical need for assistance. And very often the employees with disabilities turn to the professionals by asking for consent to maybe now click on a video after an education program has been concluded. Now, what you see here, you see a statement from a professional from an assessment or evaluation meeting. It says here, in the forefront is the pedagogics, the motivation of the person who is undergoing this accompanying measure. That's really focused on it. This quote shows just how important the professionals are vis-à-vis the attitude and the assistance of handling digital education programs and digital platforms. Now here, what you see here is you see a shift within the assistance situation. So here, the aforementioned diBa expert is in the focus. So the professionals will withdraw and leave it up to the employees with disabilities to try out the digital platform, which does not mean that assistance no longer plays a role. But here it is handled by the diBa expert. So that's one of the employees with disabilities who acts as the diBa expert. And it became clear that this is a development which usually does not happen in the first implementation stage, but rather in the second or the third stage. That's when we observed it. And this was accepted very well. The employees with disabilities still tried to get assistance, but they found it with the diBa expert, so a peer among their own. And for this person, it was an opportunity to show personal competences, social competences, try them out in practical exercise. Practical implementation of digital assistance can be seen in a range, suggesting assistance, presenting, moderating assistance, and restrained assistance. These are various forms of assistance, and each of these forms has various pros and cons. The presenting or specifying assistance offers safe orientation to participants. It offers a kind of program which people and disabled can be focusing on. But it's also the challenge that thus participation can be limited when the program and the education contents that are being used are already sort of presupposed and are not available to be chosen from. Contrary to that, we would have a rather restrained form of assistance. With that form, the field is left to the participants. It provides the utmost of scope of action, but that can lead to people being overtaxed. And when necessary support is not being given and initiatives would be petering out. One example would be, for example, parallel to usage of the learning platform, if offers from the internet could be integrated into the learning platform. Various times that was suggested, but practically it has not been implemented. So concrete support was not given so that people could move into the internet and that people would be enabled to use other things over the internet. So, and in the middle we have this kind of presenting or moderating assistance that would bring both worlds together and strikes a balance between a necessary specification of programs but also individual scope of action. But that's, I'm sure, the most complex situation of assistance, because here you need to have content and methods in your know-how in order to react with the form of assistance that is necessary in a particular situation and without deciding about programs straight away for the person. So apart from the practical assistance situation in the institutions for the question of implementation of digital education programs, you need to see that it is an organizational matter as well. And here, first of all, it is necessary to create the necessary technical infrastructure. So without Wi-Fi and tablets, there are no digital education programs, and the use of smartphones in sheltered workshops is typically not part of everyday practical education. It's usually not desired to be that. And on the other hand, there is a necessity to create an understanding about what do you want to do when and how would you want to have people using digital education programs. And the expectation of the people involved play a role. What do you believe? What does it mean, or what is involved when you offer and integrate digital education into the practical work of sheltered workshops? The experience from our groups showed that the necessary resources that are required are lower than originally believed. So, in other words, it was simpler than people thought it would be. Very often, professionals working in the sheltered workshops say that the practical use of digital education programs in the working area of the sheltered workshops cannot be practiced. Why? Well, because there the focus is on production procedures. This structural prompting, this structural presetting, presupposes here including digital offers across all the departments of sheltered workshops for people with disabilities, if you want to have this kind of approach. And typically, this is rather usually be done in the vocational training sector. For the working area, working proper, we can see after establishing our model groups that digital education can be offered as accompanying education. That's the place that is presupposed by the organization where digital education could find its place. And how that looks like in practical terms with digital education platform for this, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Engelkes, who will tell you more about it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rink. Now, with implementation, what has become clear to us now And this is true for so many things that we have in our instrument box, also in social management. It's not that the instruments are good or bad. It's all a question of the application. So where are the opportunities and the challenges? That's important. And it has become clear that with digitalization, it has got a lot to do with attitudes. And now I'm looking forward to what Miss Engelkes, as a cultural scientist, has to tell us as to how independent learning can happening, if I understood it correctly, and how to qualify people there. Because of course, this is something which is ever so important to us and which is good fun in learning, that you do have independent forms of learning. Thank you so much. Yes, exactly. And I'd like to come back to that right away. The core of my work as a media designer in this project is to provide digital education programs that can be used independently and that actually is also entertaining. But let me start right from the beginning. The topic of my presentation is development and production of digital education offers for and with people with disabilities. And in this presentation, I am talking about insight into the development and production of digital education offers, how it works, and what is necessary. And secondly, I'll talk about participatory production of learning modules in workshops in the course of our research project. So now on the initial situation. The diBa-Model project has two perspectives as regards the research design. A, it's research, that is something my colleagues talked about already, and B, that's a second area, that's the development and production of tailor-made education offers in order, and I quote from our research design, in order to promote people with disabilities with digital education programs and offer them the opportunity, the possibilities to qualify for the general labor market and thus change over from the institutions of assistance to people with disabilities. It is important to touch upon issues around vocational training. It's about target group oriented digital qualification material, plain language, simple language, that's something which was mentioned before, and giving orientation in the design and live up to the reality of the life of people with disabilities. And then it's all about independent supply of information and independent further training on a learning platform with the help of modules, with films, with lots of interaction. And something which I haven't mentioned yet, of course, it's also about participating of people with disabilities in the production processes. That's actually the most exciting thing, and I'm going to talk a bit about it in my presentation here. There are two ways to proceed for developing digital education to qualify for the general labor market. You can do that through general education or framework programs on education that exist, or through the requirements on education of people with disabilities. And in our diBa-Model project, we of course specifically want to use the education that's required by people with disabilities and the participatory processes, which is why we use the second path. We looked at the requirements, the needs of people when it comes to education, people with disabilities. The way was already paved through Professor Kollhoff's study and the one from Dr. Hartung-Ziehlke and Dr. Frankenstein. Professor Kollhoff has already talked about this study. Now, after that study, we got a long list of fields of interest in the vocational training context. And if you take a closer look at that list that was devised there and the topics that were mentioned there, then three major clusters can be formed. It's skills, technical skills, practical work, number 2, and 3 areas of job areas. Skill competence would be working in a team, attitude towards work, on work practice, learning units like health and safety, fire protection, first aid, and then on number 3, job areas, could be portraits of jobs. How does a job look like on the general labor market in this or that area of work? In the diBa-Model project, the way we're realizing it, and we're not finished yet, we continue to work till the end of August. By then, we will have more than 70 education modules on these clusters that will be made available to everyone without any limitation. And as regards availability and provision, the education programs of our diBa-Model project are available on our own diBa YouTube channel, and they're also on a learning management system. Through our cooperation with GDW Nord, we fortunately have access to the education management system DDAP, which allows us to show our offers in an interactive fashion. We can actually, people can control their learning, and we can learn, or we can control the steps that people are undertaking, which is impossible through YouTube. We are very pleased to have such a modern format for the diBa-Model, and we'll be able to offer this on a long-term basis. Some of the diBa education programs are interactive learning modules. They are in the DDAP module, and I'd like to introduce them to you just a bit on DDAP, the platform, the education platform. There are 11 fields, 11 topics: knowledge and rights, social cohesion, work and education. Mr. Tidau this afternoon will be talking about DDAP as a learning platform and will present it to you. I'm coming back to the context of professional or vocational qualification. There are really there is lots of interaction between the modules that exist and that will be coming up in the DDAP module and that fit the vocational training module. By way of example, we'll take a look at work and learning, and there, for example, is the exercise on different jobs, on fields of jobs, areas, job areas, and that's one of our three issues. You see the tiles here. The tiles show the various learning units on various issues. Here we have the field car mechanic or assistant in a car mechanic workshop, work in a hotel, or work as an independent dance artist, etc. In the context of this research project, we have developed more than 20 portraits of individual work areas of work, and here we are showing people with disabilities who are already successful in the general labor market and usually before have been in sheltered workshops. There is a very specific style of narration which always mean that people with disabilities give their point of view and we just look above their shoulder in the film. That's, design thinking, as Mr. Schmachtenberg talked about it. So here we are trying to take the point of view of the person we are showing here. And in film theory, that's also a participatory approach. The protagonists show us about their world, show us their world in their film, and we don't report about them. And all of these films were released by the people who are the main protagonists in the film. The 20 interactive learning modules on various vocational fields provide some insight into working in a pharmacy, for example, becoming a cleaner. And these are issues that were mentioned in the course of the study during the research work of Dr. Frankenstein and Mr. Rink. Those are the things that people talked about. They said, we want to know what it looks like when we become cleaners, for example, or work in the domestic arena. And that's something which we integrated into our work here. Let me give you one example here. One example of a portrait I would like to show to you here. and at least I'd like to start it. This is someone who we were able to film, who works in a car repair shop. And we call this learning unit Car Repair Shop Assistant. So let's take a look at it. You have opened the LearnBox Car Repair Shop Assistant in the vocational training areas in the general labor market. Sven shows you which tasks he has as an assistant in the car repair shop and which skills and capacities are necessary. Sven, for 30 years, has been working in a sheltered workshop for people with disabilities, and for some time he is working in a car repair shop as an assistant. He learns a lot and he's very satisfied with his job. Click on the play button in order to find out about Sven's working life. So my name is Sven, and I'm really the general dog's body. I actually remove tires, balance the tires, balance the cars. I help my colleagues here. We have tire changing seasons, so cars with winter tires come in. We move the winter tires off the cars, then we store them on the computer. I pick out the tires for today. We have 2 tire change operations. The tires are already here. So for me, you know, there's quite a lot to do, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm happy about it. So here, those tires you have to move out of the warehouse. Yes, I'll do that, says Sven. In the morning, I start my work at 8 a.m., but I'm at work at 7:30 already. I'm looking at what's happening. Well, the rules are to be there right in time, be friendly, be flexible, be open vis-à-vis customer requests. So, you know, make a good appearance vis-à-vis customers. You have to be willing to learn. That's something which I have done in the beginning. I always asked my boss, can I please take a look at how you are doing things? And he said, no problem. You are just learning it, and no one is finished with learning. And then by and by, I trained myself how to use the balancer. I looked at my colleagues, how they did the balancing, and then they explained it to me, and since then I actually use the balancer on my own, so I do the complete balancing operations. I've been here for 2 years now, and I feel really well here. The first time was difficult for me. It was difficult to arrive properly, and at that point of time I couldn't really do anything apart from looking on and, you know, try to learn as much as I can. I wanted to learn as much as I can, and because of that I know quite a lot of things, and more I get more and more tasks. And when my colleagues need me, then they call me, Sven, can you help me here or there, please? So I have lots of things to do everywhere, and my colleagues are really very kind. So you can say we're really kind of a family here. He does an excellent job. He's been with us since April 2020, and because of the time with us, he's learned a lot already. And lots of work he does independently, assemble the tires, that's almost solely his job, and also recondition tires, he can actually do that, he knows how to do it. So it's really enriching our operation here. I'd recommend this quite clearly. You can't be prouder than this. You get lots of praise, you are recognized and appreciated, you have a regular job, you have your lunch breaks, you have your colleagues. And we work till 5 p.m. Then we have free time. And in the evenings, you know what you have done, and I feel really well here, and I'm so happy about it. So I think Sven, our actor here, deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Unfortunately, I mean, we would have loved to have him here, but unfortunately he wasn't able to attend, regrettably so, and also other people who we invited to join us here. But I'll come back to that in a minute. So just one word on the learning units, but I think Mr. Tidau will explain this to us this afternoon. This learning unit goes beyond, it goes on. So here you see which rules are applicable to workshop assistants. Move the right answers to the yellow convertible. Being right in time, being able to learn or willing to learn, no breaks. So tests were desired. That's what we found out. Tests are important in digital education, and as far as possible, we integrated it. So we have quizzes here. That's a classic test. How much did people learn from it? I believe that's right. Oh, that's unfortunately wrong. Of course, there are breaks, regular breaks for people in a car repair shop. So let me try this one here. Willing to learn. Yes, exactly. That's true. It's always important to be curious and willing to learn. And being right in time. Yes, true. Being right in time is quite important in your working life. Right, okay. Then we go on, and there also comes a summary and an end, and then you can move up to the other fields of work and go on with it. And do it in your own speed you learn with, and depending on what you are interested in, you can take a look at all the other fields of work. And since we unfortunately do not have any of our actors here who we did videos and films with, and none of from our project groups, I would like to bring two people to you who say something about their experience. When you are on the general labor market, you have to work faster and you have to come to terms with other people. There are lots of people who do not necessarily know how to behave with people with disabilities. But, you know, it was quite helpful to see how you can work on the general labor market. Well, it's quite practical because you can do it in between at home, and you always can draw from something from that. And there are people who are quite interested in the labor market and in the world of work, and don't just want to work in the sheltered framework. And another issue, another cluster from the list was the cluster on vocational training and skills and competencies here for the creation of various modules, in particular attitude to work. We have here also selected the participatory approach on the attitude towards work or work ethics that was created in close cooperation with people with disability. The in attendance workshops that we planned for with the model groups, we had to change that to hybrid or online workshops depending on the infection procedure, because our workshops were happening during the times of pandemic with limited access, and we had to refocus matters. But still, 6 learning modules were created in analog or an online format. So we did our workshops on those modules. Per model group, there were 2 workshops. And the way they happened was in workshop number 1, that topic, attitude towards work, we selected certain different issues falling below that, for example, being able to work in a team or going to work in a timely fashion. So what belongs to that? Cleanliness, for example, would be another one. And then we worked on developing this issue, this subject, and then finally we tried to find a visual setting with a research project. The institutions got tablets that served as cameras, and great pictures and great films were shot with them. one of the workshop participants, and one professional is here. Lisa, thank you very much for your support, I want to say at this point. And then there was workshop number 2. Once the modules were finished, we worked with the images from the workshop, from the material, so we rechecked it and either improved it or changed the material, or we agreed on this and released the material for use. So we'll take a look at one of the learning boxes on attitude to work. By way of example, I have diligent work, cleanliness and orderliness, and being able to work in a team here. You have opened the learning box diligent work. Here you find out what that means and why diligent work is important. Mark has a new job in assembly. He needs to bring together different things and package them. He wants to make his work well and thinks that in his new job, diligent work and careful work is important. For example, in Mark in assembly, his task is to sort the small parts and package them. He's got specific instructions how to work. It's important that no wrong parts come into the packages. He needs to work very carefully and diligently. With some jobs, it's specifically important to work diligently and careful, for example, with activities all around the health of people. In this, clean room material for hospitals are packaged. The materials must not be assembled dirt, because dirt can be dangerous for ill people. The people working there pay attention that they always wear the hairnet before they enter into the clean room. Why is diligent work so important? If we don't work diligently, products or services can create errors. Superiors and customers don't want that. Everything should be delivered in the agreed upon quality. And diligence also means to do the work clearly and the way it's necessary and with the necessary patience. In order for you to work diligently, you need sufficient time for it. Talk to your colleagues and superiors if you believe that you don't have enough time to carry out the work adequately. If you want to work diligently and carefully, you always have to focus well on the work. Concentrate, focus means that your ideas and your thoughts need to be directed on what you're doing. Pay attention that you're not diverted by anything. Working diligently and in a focused manner also means that you stick to the breaks allotted to you. If you have regular breaks, you can concentrate in a better way while working. Okay, I'm sure that you can look at it yourselves. These are readily accessible for everyone. So now, what I would like to do, I'd briefly like to take a look at the conclusion, which summarizes the experience from the workshop. So we had highly motivated participants with a high degree of willingness to be active. There is a general interest in digital issues. There were media competencies available on the part of the participants, and these workshops led to coming up with new digital competencies by actively integrating the disabled people. The media and photo session were a nice, new and different thing in the everyday life of sheltered workshops, and there was a positive evaluation by the participating employees and professionals, and perspectives were improved also by including people with disabilities. And at the very end, I would like to hear from one one professional who explains this to us, in particular when it comes to the experience that they came up with. So the most important experience from this project is that people with disabilities can be extremely fit when it comes to handling digital media, and that they want to be fit. almost all of our participants have a mobile phone, and they use media in their leisure time, deal with that, and I think that's a really important point, and we try to move that forward. And that's something which I learned, that you probably need to give more to them, and you can actually get a lot out of it. Just how fit our participants are when it comes to media use, sometimes that's really surprising. And, people where you do not think that will work pretty well, I'm quite surprised by it. And it shows to you that modern life is not something in the future. This is what's happening at the moment, and that people just want to use it and are using it.